Hello, children. This is Miss Gloria from New Life Church. We're doing a set of lessons this summer about what does the Bible tell us about us, about people. Does the Bible tell you anything about you? Last week we learned that God made us. God made you, and so you are something that God thinks is very good. You are God's masterpiece. And today we're going to hear about how we can be strong, how you can be strong in God. God can make you strong. But sometimes we have to be strong when we don't seem to have very much to help us. No things to help us, not much people to help us. And in fact, I don't have a lot of time to make this video, and I don't have a lot of stuff. Usually I bring in all kinds of interesting things to show you and make things that you can see. And today all I have is a piece of paper. I don't have anything to write on. Can I actually do the story of Gideon with just this piece of paper? And that's all I have? Well, I decided to go ahead and try to do that anyway, because in the story, Gideon doesn't have very much either, and yet God helps him to be strong. So let's find out how that happens. Now, this is back when the people of Israel were living in their own country, but before they had any kings. And before they had any kings, they had people called judges. A judge was not exactly like a king or something, and not like a judge you see today. They were almost more like heroes. God would pick somebody when they were in trouble, and he would call them, and they would be a judge, partly because they would help people decide what to do, but partly they would save people when they were in trouble. And in this case, they were really in trouble. And there was a reason they were in trouble, and that was that they didn't always remember that they should worship God. Sometimes they saw all the people around them, and they wanted to worship the gods of the people around them that are not real gods at all. Especially if those people look stronger and richer and more important, maybe they thought they would worship their gods instead of the true God, and maybe that would help them. But whenever they did that, then God would let them be attacked by their enemies. In this case, they had the Midianites. The Midianites would come in basically when all the grain was growing, and they would take away the grain that people harvested immediately so people wouldn't have anything to eat. And so people were afraid. And when we meet Gideon, Gideon is hiding. I'm hiding in this piece of paper here. But Gideon was hiding better than that. He was kind of hiding in a hole in the ground. This hole in the ground was actually a wine press, which means it was a place where you put in grapes, and people would stomp the grapes out of the ground in order to make wine out of them. And he was down in the bottom of the wine press with this little bit of grain. And he was taking his little bit of grain and he was threshing it down in there. Now, when you pick grain, it's got the part you can eat, which is good, and you can make flour and bread out of it, and the part's like straw. And you have to get rid of the straw. And the way you get rid of it is the straw is really light and just flies up, and the grain tends to be heavy. So people take some sort of an object. I'm going to turn my paper into an object. And they just whack on the grain like this. That's called threshing. And the straw part just flies up, out, and is carried away by the wind, and then the part they have left is the good grain that they can eat. So Gideon is down in this hole, and he's threshing, and he's probably doing it really quietly, because he doesn't want the Midianites to come and steal the grain that he's got already. So let's see what happens. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak and Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abarite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it for the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." And I bet the first thing Gideon wanted to say was, "Shh, I'm trying to be very quiet here." Let's see what Gideon says. "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told them about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" So this says the angel of the Lord. And some people think the angel of the Lord is kind of almost like an appearance of God himself. He just gives the message of God. So it's just like God talking to you. Anyway, he says, go in the strength you have. Go with what you have. What little bitty amount you have. Let's see what Gideon says. "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I'm the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites." So Here was Gideon. The angel is saying to him, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." But he didn't feel like a mighty warrior. He was hiding in the ground because he was afraid. And in fact, he knew that God was not going to help him if his family was still worshiping all those bad gods. Even his father was worshiping those bad gods. He had an altar to Baal, and he had a special pole to the goddess Asherah. I'm going to fold this paper up again into our pole here. So what was Gideon going to do? Well, Gideon wasn't terribly brave to start with. Gideon actually went out in the middle of the night, and he knocked down the altar of Baal and the pole of Asherah, and he cut it up and he burned it, and he made a sacrifice to God. I'm going to fold this paper into an altar. An altar kind of looks like a table, and it's a place where people make sacrifices to worship God. And he was just going to burn that up and put it on this table. When people got up in the morning, they were kind of shocked. They were like, "Who did that? Who cut down the altar?" They went and complained to Gideon's dad. But even though Gideon's dad had an altar to these bad gods, he didn't actually care about them all that much. I think he decided maybe Gideon was right. He told people to leave Gideon alone. I'm going to fold this a little bit more so my altar stands up better. Let's see if I can get my altar to stand up better. Here we go. There's my altar. Anyway, Gideon decided that God was with him and he was going to try to do it. And he gathered up a bunch of people. And it says here in the Bible that Gideon gathered up 32,000 people. Now that seems like a lot of people, but the Midianites were way more than 32,000 people. So he had this army, but it was kind of a little army compared to that. But you know what the Lord said to him? He said, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me." God wanted to show that it was God who was doing it and not Gideon, and not their own strength. So Gideon decided if he had too many men, he would say, "Well, anybody who's a little bit scared, you can go home." And you know what? Most of the people went home. There were only 10,000 people left. And God even thought that was still too many. Gideon took them down to the water to see how they drank water, and he only picked the ones that drank correctly. And in the end, Gideon ended up with only 300 men. 300 men for all of those Midianites. But maybe you've heard the story of Gideon before and you know what happened. They didn't actually fight at all. They just gathered around the enemy on the hillsides, and they all of a sudden showed off a lot of bright lights. I'm going to use my paper one more time, and I'm going to make it into a trumpet. And they blew their trumpets, whoo, 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 and they made this huge noise, and they shouted, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon." And then the army was so afraid they thought they were being attacked, and they all attacked each other and killed each other and ran away, and there was nobody left. So you see, God really did it and not Gideon. And so that's one thing we can learn. We can be strong in the Lord. And if all we have is 300 men, or one little piece of paper, or maybe just the verses we remember from the Bible, in our situations where we are afraid, we can remember that we can be strong in the Lord.